Tuesday, March 6th?
March 6th, 2018, for the Wastewater Support Committee.
I'm also the heckler back here.
That's good. Okay. Any public comments? Okay. All right, did everybody get a copy of the minutes from the February 15 and February 20? Did everybody?
Yes.
You got them, okay.
Madam Chair, since I was not at the February 20th meeting, I would suggest that we take them up one at a time, if that's possible.
Okay,
Would you like a motion?
yes, please. Yeah, I'm not doing well.
I move
Yes.
that we approve the minutes of February 15, 2018 as presented.
I second it.
I have a comment.
Oh,
Pardon.
okay.
Yeah, I don't have a copy with me.
I do. No, wait. You got it already.
In this section on identification of the town's website,
Yeah.
it talks a little bit about questions are going to be directed to the proper person.
Oh, yeah, it reads for the public. Sharon gave the committee email address which residents could use to send questions. It is wastewater@townofharwich.us. Any questions received will be directed to the proper person, and the committee will follow up to make sure that each question receives a response.
So my comment would be, who is the traffic cop? Who's directing the questions to the proper person?
If it's coming to wastewater, it'll end up coming to me.
Sharon's the chair's the only one that gets the wastewater
Yeah.
emails, so.
Yeah, so then I would forward it on. And I thought at that meeting, we also gave Dan's,
Pelletier?
Palantir's email. Yeah, I thought we gave,
I would suggest we maybe clarify that the chairman of the committee is going to be directing those questions
All
to
right.
the proper people.
all right.
I can amend it with that language. And what you said, Sharon, about Dan's, that was at a previous meeting. That's why that's not in these minutes.
All right, okay,
So I'll amend my motion.
all right,
And you'll amend this, you'll second it.
I'll second the amendment.
all right, that's for the 15th. All right.
Would you like to vote that, Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, let's,
Thank you.
I'm not
We're
doing
trying to
well.
help you out this morning.
Okay.
We know it was a rough night. so.
Yes, it was, it really was. All right, a vote?
Aye,
Aye.
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 and I can't do February 20th, so I'd ask someone else who is there to do that, please.
Did Noreen vote?
Yes.
Oh, you did, I didn't hear you, okay.
She didn't put her hand up.
Okay, the February
Put her finger
20th minutes, I gotta get a pencil.
I'll make that motion to accept the minutes of the 20th of February, 2018.
I second it.
Okay.
We should vote?
Vote,
All in
Minutes
favor?
of-
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm abstaining because I wasn't there.
All right, the town administrator isn't here yet, so we'll bump him down till he gets here. Let's go to the discussions. The letter to the homeowners. Now, let me explain what I did here.
Go ahead, sorry if I can-
I had gotten an email from one of the town people that felt that some of the people in East Harwich were not even aware that the sewering was taking place. So I put together a letter that provides this information and very general information as to where to go to get it. I think you all have a copy. I don't know if I have extras.
I have an extra.
Okay.
Does everyone have one?
I don't know
I
if,
don't.
Hold on, let me give you.
I thought I had
It's on
one
in
for
front of us.
everybody.
It should be in the
And-
package.
oh,
It might
there's-
be in the
Yeah,
packet.
it's in front of me.
Yeah.
Oh, here was one.
Okay.
There's one. Might have been one I
Oh,
scribbled.
wait a minute, I get, oh, okay.
Well, that wasn't the letter.
Do you not have
No.
one?
Here, there, handed the wrong thing, sorry about that.
That's all right.
All right. So I did have the board take a look at this last night, and they were okay with it. This is basically for information for where the town people can go to get the information. I know you people don't have it out there. Do you want me to quick read it? It's not very long. Do you want to?
I read it.
You read it? You? All right.
I think we should read it.
Okay.
For the camera.
All right. It says, East Harwich Sewer System Project. Dear homeowner, you're receiving this letter because you live in East Harwich and may be affected by the sewering project. Although the list of homes that will be sewered is not finalized, we would like to keep you informed about the project. The final list should be available by the end of March or early April. The town's website, which is listed, has a link to the wastewater site that contains information about this project. This is currently being reorganized and updated, and new information will be added as it becomes available. There's also a wastewater support committee that meets the first and third Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. in the Griffin Room at Town Hall, and the third Thursday evening at 6 p.m. also in the Griffin Room at Town Hall. The role of the Wastewater Support Committee is to support the flow of information and concerns from the residents to the town and provide information from the town administration to the residents. The committee is working on putting together a step-by-step guide of information for homeowners who are to be sewered to help them work through this process. There is also information available at the Harwich Community Center, Harwich Library, and Town Hall. A poster with the schedule for the project is located in the community center and will soon be available in the library. And I will add to that, it is now in the library. I took it over yesterday.
Comments?
Comment? Oh.
Okay, so, and I saw the presentation last night, so I've heard the selectmen's comments. My only serious comment on the letter right now, I'm so glad something is going out to the homes affected, and that part's wonderful. The second last paragraph talks about that we're putting together the step-by-step guide for connection. And I know at our first meeting, I believe it was Barbara from the East Wind area who brought up the Falmouth installation document to us, and we started talking about it would be great to have something like that for this town, that we should have a champion to oversee the process of writing something like that for this town, either editing Falmouth or writing a new one, but something of that ilk. And I know Ann also talked about a working workbook, so to speak. So, it's all kind of around the same idea. My only problem is that, I always hate to tell people we're doing something if we're not doing it. So unless we have somebody assigned to doing this, or a timeline, or could discuss that now, then I'm not comfortable with telling people that we are doing it.
All right. My comment on that was going to be after, after the May meeting, we can get started on that, or we can start it earlier. Now, I may not be here for a short time. And you were working with Dan.
I already have had a extended meeting with Dan, and I have requested a chat with some other people who might have insight into this from Eastham, and also someone who is a retired engineer who's done this kind of work, and I thought we might be able to, have an outsider with no fee simply go over it and say, oh, let's do this. I'm going to write it up and present it not only to all of you, but to Dan Pelletier for his town-specific insights into it, to Chris Clark, who will be involved and may have input into it, and to the selectmen, and to any other of the groups that might have impact on what's going forward. The reason I haven't prepared it for today's meeting is there are still pieces of information that need to be verified.
Okay.
One of them, actually, and I'm going to share that with you. Dan has sent me something on it, but we really need to pursue it further. And that is, I'm sure some people are going to say, I'm going to use my own guy to do the work, or somebody who's certified elsewhere, or I'm going to do it myself. Well, that may impact their ability to get the loan from the county. They have stipulations, and I think it's important to double-check some of that information as we go. So I'm just sharing with you where I am in that process.
That's great, and that really is great. But I didn't really need to get into the mechanics of the thing. I just want to make sure that we're aware that if we present that to the town, it needs to be something that all 5 of us have input into, as well as Chris and others along the way. So as long as we as a committee acknowledge that we're going to have to allow time for that task, once Ann is done with, with it to a state where she can present it, then I'm fine with this being in the letter.
So could I, just as a follow-on, could I just ask when you think you might have a draft available for this group? No pressure, but.
No, I mean, I'm putting pressure on myself on that, but the real difficulty is getting interface with people who can input. But I'm going to give you an estimated date of the March 20th meeting.
Okay.
Ann, too, originally, well, I mean, you could always pass out sections to other people, too. We can discuss that on the 20th, but, I'm not sure how it will be designed with how many sections, but, when it comes on the 20th, you might want to say, well, Peter's really great at this section. Let's have him do the final on that, or, whatever.
I'm putting it at least provisionally under topics, because Q&A from the audience and people in the town has come in. So, for example, there's going to be a section that discusses decks, because people keep asking about decks. And so it's really, it's going to be set up so that if you have a question, you can scan down a left column and say, oh, there's what I have a question about. It's also going to contain sections that are to be pursued.
Right.
I'm very big, which we haven't been doing in this group, on version control. So one of the worst things that can happen with something like this is somebody gets one, prints it, and then they don't realize there are later editions, if you will. And so anything I give to any of you will have, thanks to Microsoft, a date, time, and author at the bottom, and maybe even a version of the document indicated, so that if somebody is upset about something or confused, we can say, well, are you sure you're on version XYZ? And that way, everybody is on the same timeline. So that's my input on that.
Look forward to a draft. I mean,
Right.
until we get a draft, we don't, how do we make comments, but I look
I'm
forward to it.
trying to avoid too many circuits through.
That's fine.
And if we get a draft, then it would have to be on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's about, I'd say 80% there. If I can't get to the critical people, it'll simply fall
Right.
into the category of to be determined, and all of you can
Fine.
have input.
But I mean, if it doesn't make it till the meeting after that, that's fine too. I just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure we had a plan.
It's
You know what
going
I
to be
mean?
a
It's
work in
lot.
progress in
Right.
any event, in that I'm really looking forward to any additional questions that come in on March 15th in the evening meeting, if the public has additional questions. And I've already had people seeking me out, which they've all been about timeline and finance, which is a tougher section of that, frankly. I mean, somebody asked me, should I put off my retirement for 2 years to pay for it? So it's
So-
big issues.
And it's an important document,
Yeah.
so, and it will take us a while to go through it. So it might even be something we may not consider finalizing till after the April CDM meeting, because there's gonna be so many. By the way, I don't know if you heard that, Peter, there's gonna be a CDM meeting in April, so that's great. But, we can see how that goes. Thank you.
One of the things that would be, well, I'll save that for I have comments on this letter, and they're really questions as well as comments.
That
So,
ends my comment.
Okay.
Peter, do you have any?
I have comments, so just wait until, are you done, Lori?
Yes,
Okay, who's next? Want me to be next? You next,
go
Chris?
ahead. Any comments?
Just wordsmithing on the paragraph, I might have written you on this paragraph 4.
Mm-hmm.
I would be a little more proactive and say the committee is putting together and
All right, just.
get
putting
rid of that working on.
All right,
Excellent, that was
Yes.
one of my comments. So.
all right.
I have comments,
Go ahead.
Madam. Some of them are questions. This is titled East Harwich. Is this going to everyone in East Harwich? Is it only going to the people who are going to be sewered? Because my concern is that this could create a considerable confusion, which may already be out there, in that I've had people saying, oh, well, we're on this list when they're not in phase 2. It's wishful thinking, if you will, since they've already cleared a lot and are planning to build based on their perceptions. So I would suggest that we determine who is going to get this. And I know we don't have the final, I'm speaking to Chris Clark in the audience, we don't have the final list of those who might or might not be included in the list. And I'm curious if you have the number of people and those actual addresses.
Number one, good morning.
Good morning.
Just in terms of that, the list that I've seen is 628, so that's pretty specific in terms of number of parcels. Just as a suggestion, I did notice this in terms of East Harwich. I always refer to it as the Pleasant Bay watershed. So I don't know if you want to kind of get into that terminology, and it's really the southern section of the Pleasant Bay watershed, because it will be Phase 3, and ultimately, potentially, Phase 8 would be the northern section of Pleasant Bay. So I don't know if people view East Harwich as too small or Pleasant Bay. I mean, so just as a suggestion in terms of that. But in terms of the properties, I think on the list, I did share this with Sharon, that the list that was generated to send out the survey, which is the survey crews going to the individual homes, we actually generated those lists in the list from the assessor's office as well as the labels. So last night I had mentioned
Oh,
Sharon.
yeah, that you would,
that
yes, all right.
you can get, if that's the list we want to use, the
Yeah.
628, we can get the labels from the Board of Assessors.
Now, did that include the areas that you were saying you were originally not in Phase 2, that I'm not sure where they were coming
Yeah,
from?
there's some elements that are in Phase 3 that are going to be incorporated into Phase 2. Those along Route 137. So I think that those are on that list.
Okay.
And they should be on the list,
All
but we
right.
can certainly double check that.
All right, so then we can call this the,
That was the title of the previous letter, so we should probably be consistent because people might be confused. The one that went to homeowners saying they were going to be, the field survey would be done, did say Pleasant Bay, didn't it?
I don't remember. I know the Warren article, which is one of the things I've been working on recently to make sure we get that squared away. I've been doing the terminology of Southern Pleasant Bay watershed. So I've been trying to use that terminology because that's what's referred to in the CWMP, just for that linkage. So if
All right.
someone wants to look up the CWMP, they have that.
all right, so then once we get this letter finalized of the way we want to word it, then my understanding was from last evening that you have the list.
The mailing list?
Yeah,
Yeah, we can generate the list. That's not a big deal. I
right.
can get out in the assessor's office and just ask them to do the labels.
all
I
right.
mean, if I did have a volunteer that wanted to put labels on, I think that would have to be all done manually.
By the way, if we miss somebody, as long as this goes up on our website at some point in
Yeah.
time, they'll at least be able to,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
as an afterthought.
Yeah,
get
I
to
just
it.
wanted to make sure we were going to hit the people that aren't looking at the website or listening to the presentations.
And I do know last night, just for the other board members at the selectmen's meeting, that, I had volunteered that you can have my office number on there and the email, as well as Dan Pelletier. I have fielded a number of questions already, and I think
All right.
people do appreciate the.
All right. All right.
I have a question for Chris. If one of these 628 people are second homeowners here, where does that letter go?
In the assessor's office, it's the owner of record. So if the owner lives in New York, then the letter goes to New York. So it is owner.
It's where their tax bill goes, right?
It's where the tax bill goes. If it's a tenant, they will not receive it. It
Thank
goes
you.
to the property owner.
All right.
What about ones that are held in a trust? I assume those have someone managing the trust as
It
well?
would go to the address of the trust.
Do we have something, is the list of the 628, is it also titled the Pleasant Bay Watershed in our website? Because otherwise, we're telling people they're to go to a section of the website, and it may not be correspondingly labeled with the letter.
We
Do
can
we
make
know?
sure it does. I don't know, I don't remember what they titled that, to be honest.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, I think you have some.
You done?
I'm done.
Okay, all right, so in the first sentence, I changed that may be affected by the sewering project to may be affected by the upcoming Pleasant Bay Watershed Sewer Project, is what I called it, if you like that. Okay with that? In the third paragraph, we talk about to support the flow of information. We're dealing with sewer, I hate to talk about flow. It can be a nasty word.
Wait, where are you again?
The
She just bailed.
Transfer.
third paragraph, second line from the bottom.
Oh,
Where
okay.
it says, support the flow of information, I would propose to make it support the exchange of information.
Okay, all right,
Just to be okay.
okay.
The other thing I would say is, since we're going to the expense, not a huge expense, but worry about the taxpayer dollars, putting a stamp on this and the envelopes and printing this and whatnot, I think we should maximize what information we can give them. So there is this thing called the backside of this piece of paper. And so,
Okay.
to help Ann's question or concern about who's affected and whatnot, I would suggest that we actually put that East Harwich Phase 2 cartoon on here, Phase 3, and highlight, I think it's a pinky area, whatever it is, but make sure that stands out so people can see that. And under that, I would put a project timeline, and that's simply the
Yes.
5 or 6 bullets we have from the presentation on the 15th that says,
All right, how do we get these reduced to fit on there?
this? Reduce it.
The map is already 8.5 by 11.
Yeah, so you can shoot it down
So the
further,
map could
right?
just be on the, yeah, we could shrink
Yeah,
that a
fit
little
it to
bit.
half a page.
Oh, all right, all right, all right,
I'm not saying generate more paper, I'm just saying may take advantage of the backside.
all right, all right.
And the timeline can be shrunk, very easily,
That's bullets.
it's only 6 bullets, I think, so. You know what I'm talking about?
All right, you're not talking about the,
No, what
No.
I'm talking about is when we made the presentation
The PowerPoint.
that Noreen and I did about, at the 15th meeting, they just went through and we took the project timeline, like, when's the first date that sewage starts?
all right,
When's the first connection time?
all right,
Only 6 bullets.
all right, all right. I thought you were talking
No,
about that.
no, that would be too complicated. I just want to keep it simple.
All right,
And again, the bullets should probably be labeled specifically to Pleasant Bay above the bullets, so that people don't think it's the whole.
You put the title on, so
Yeah,
I'll put a box
that's
around
just,
it.
I'm just putting that in because things have a tendency to wander on their own.
So that's what I would do.
all right,
That's a good idea.
all right.
One final, should we have the town
Seal.
logo on top and seal and,
Should be on town letterhead, probably.
right,
All right,
okay.
We could put the tax bill in there, too. It's going to be April 1st, right? We just slide it in.
Be this big, the pad and everything.
okay.
So, you need a vote?
Do we need a vote? We need a vote on this.
Sure, why not? Make it official.
I'll make a motion that with the changes that we have just discussed regarding adding the map and a timeline to the back of the page, putting the item on letterhead, some wordsmithing in the few paragraphs that have been previously referenced, the addition of the contact information for Town Administrator Chris Clark and Water Superintendent Dan Pelletier, that we vote to approve this letter with those changes.
Second.
Call a vote
Oh, yeah, vote.
on
All
the
in
letter.
favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
No, no.
No, you have to call it.
I don't know.
All those in favor of the motion so signify by saying aye.
Aye, all
Aye.
right,
Aye.
he did it.
Aye. And those opposed? It's unanimous vote. She so declares.
All right.
We're just trying to help out this morning.
No,
Yeah,
it's
that's
good to
all right,
help 'em
'cause my
out.
head is
You're
not-
doing
not
well.
feeling
No,
good.
you're doing very well. But-
So did you want the email and phone number, or just emails?
Email and phone,
Okay.
office.
Social
Yeah.
security number, everything.
Not the home number, huh?
All right. All right. Next up is the discussion on the outreach for the local banks and.
We skipped over the update from the town administrator, so now that he's
Oh,
here.
all right, we can
Chris,
do your
maybe-
update.
Chris,
7 minutes late, but.
Hey,
maybe,
we're fast.
Chris, you want to
You guys
move
were
to the
fine.
chair?
You know, I heard you guys were a little bit under the weather, so the more distance, perhaps the better.
It spread that quickly.
Thank you for the comment, thank you for the.
I think they
opportunity.
sprayed down the copy machine after I left.
On just a couple things, I will follow up on the 4-page draft on the materials to get you guys the draft of that material. I know that Dave Young was waiting on me to finish the warrant article. The article has been drafted, it's been reviewed by the town attorney. Actually, we're in the process of sending it to bond counsel, make sure there's no issue bond counsel-wise. So we do have, I think he got that on Friday, so I will follow up with him. That's just one of the components that's gonna be part of the 4-page document. So I will try to track that down today and get that to you, so you guys can start going through any edits that you wanna see to it, and we can start to work on getting a final document. One other thing that will be coming up that Dave has provided to me is just the not DEP, it's the SRF people, the State Revolving Loan Fund people, have a requirement that if we sign up and have loans, which obviously we want to do because it's very advantageous for the town, it's a 2% borrowing, that they require a land use control document. So he has provided both to myself and to Dan Pelletier a draft of that on land use controls, and we need to get that to the Board of Selectmen for their consideration. It is a big picture document. It has the, I don't remember the exact total, I want to say 1.2 million gallons, I think is what we have to clean in the town of Harwich. So it is, how do you take and allocate that 1.2 million gallons throughout the entire town? And what happens if we want to take a section that, if we have Great Sand Lakes, which is affiliated with the IMA with Chatham, if that needs to be shifted over to the Dennis, Yarmouth, and Harwich model, how do you do that? So really, this document is just the total flow, and then how do you move it within the internal watersheds? So I don't think it gets down to a micro level of detail, but that is something that Dave has indicated to me that we need to have, or it'd be good to have that squared away for financing purposes, assuming that things go according to plan. So I will track that down too. I did have a discussion with Dave and Mike from CDM, and I know that there was some concern, even on this board, about the cost estimate. The cost estimate that was originally generated for the project is 5 years old. And I did ask them, I said, please look at it, please go through the material, and let's see where we are. Let's try to keep that 628 homes and properties, and let's see where we are. I keep getting assurances, I appreciate that they're gonna look at it a little bit more carefully, that people want to affiliate the harbor project, which is really a house and a garage, and that's in direct competition with the private sector that we have this. That contractors, though, that will be doing the sewer work themselves is a more of a specialty type work. And they don't believe that that's gonna translate. Building a house is different than putting in sewer line. I hope that's the case. That's what I keep being assured of. But I did ask them to provide some updated numbers, so if we do have to make a budget adjustment prior to town meeting, I think that would be the time to do it. But I think the goal needs to be to get as close as we can to 628. Not that 628 is a magic number, but if it's 625 or 630, whatever, I think it's important to try to deliver on that. I did attend a Pleasant Bay Alliance meeting the other day, and you know, the one thing that really strikes in my mind when you talk about this, it's the amount of kilograms of nitrogen that you remove from the environment. So it's quantity that counts. So the more homes we have, the more we're gonna help ourselves in the long run.
You know, I know there's so many facets of this, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I'll just say, I know I said in another meeting, you know, I don't see that we can alter the number of homes, you know, depending on how much the cost comes in, but that's my view. Other views would enter into that. But I would also say that if CDM were able to get the bids evaluated by February of 2019, as opposed to by April of 2019, then that would almost be a safety net. In other words, if the vote went in May of 2018 and was successful,
Right.
and then if the bid was opened and, so sad, you know, 25 million, then at least if the bid was opened at the end of February, you would still have time to put an article together for the May 2019 meeting to reauthorize that, you know, extended amount of money. Unfortunately, with the bid opening on April 1st, you've closed the door, CDM has closed the door behind us. So that's my dilemma, is that I don't really see a Plan B other than the suggestion that we do a lowered amount of homes, and I don't think that's frankly acceptable to a great many people, but.
Well, I guess I disagree a little bit
Okay.
with that, just a little bit. Certainly, I think having the bids in by February would be advantageous. It is a nature of projects of these size and this magnitude. You know, I kind of remind people that when we did the Muddy Creek project that started off at $5 million, we had cost overruns that were $6 million. Those cost overruns were simply changes in regulation at the state. And then one at the state, which was the complete streets, which they've now gotten rid of. And then the second was the FEMA floodplain maps. So there are going to be things that are going to happen that are going to potentially change. I think the point that I was trying to make is if we have a bid and the bid goes out, let's just say for illustration purposes, that we have a base bid of 600 homes, and then we want to try to get to 650, and we have that ad alternate of 50,000. That if we have the money so we can award the 600, then let's award the 600. And then let's ladder up as much as we can. The value to doing that is now we have an actual bid, so we know what the number would be that we would have to go back to town meeting with. And that's a decision that would have to be made. So to me, it's more about bid strategy than necessarily overall. And when I allude to that, that's what I'm alluding to, is just it's better to have a bid number in hand when we make decisions about moving forward. But I think that will be part and parcel anyway. They're not going to do an all-or-nothing bid. I wouldn't recommend doing an all-or-nothing bid, because then you have to redo the whole process and rescope it anyway. I mean, we've had that with the library as an example, having to rescope that. So I think doing it up front and having that information, having a good bid in hand is going to be more valuable to the community in the long run. I hope that we get it all at once.
I'm just pointing out that there will be different opinions on that if it doesn't come in the right amount when the time comes.
Yes.
Chris, could I ask, because I threw out a few weeks ago some huge number, like $6 million in interest savings if you go through the state revolving loan program. I forget the number, based on the terms and everything else versus going 3.5% or even higher in the bond market. Let's ask that either you or someone in your team take a look at that number just to make sure I'm not crazy about it. You can make certain assumptions and whatnot. Basically, there's 2% money from the state versus 3.5%, you know, going out to municipal bond funding.
Yeah, we could look at that, get it.
Because we're going to be throwing those numbers around.
Yep.
And it should be more than just me doing a calculation saying that looks like the number. Because it is, in my mind, it's a real justification for moving forward.
I mean, the nice thing, too, about this is that we're applying, and because we're applying, in some cases, we'll be applying and getting credit for partnering up with Chatham, and we're doing nitrogen reduction. So we will be eligible to go to zero. So a 0% or loan forgiveness, I think is what they call it. So having a program of this nature is going to give us a more strategic advantage. That 2% is what they currently offer. That's kind of the going rate, if you would. And we will have the opportunity potentially to go even lower because of the nature of the project we're engaged in. So all the interest savings is going to be real money. But we can get those for you.
Anyone else?
I have a question for Chris, but not on that topic.
I think I'm done with my
Okay.
update, so anything else I'm happy
Okay, so I saw last night's meeting. Kind of feels like it just left, I understand. So I will try not to get too deeply into the weeds on the issues that you covered, but I do have some questions on the proposed sewer enterprise fund. So I did make copies for people of the article, for anybody who would like it, and there are some extra copies. So I'm talking about Article 16, the sewer enterprise fund. Okay, so I've read the Department of Revenue Enterprise Fund Guide and many other documents on enterprise funds, which doesn't make me an expert. But at any rate, everything that I read on it says that you must have a budget, a detailed budget, delivered 120 days prior to distributing into the fund. Now, I understand since we're initiating a fund, that 120 days would go away. But I don't feel that the need for a budget goes away. And the Department of Revenue goes on at length about the absolute necessity of having a detailed budget every year for any transfer into any existing or new enterprise fund. Now, I also understand that it's beyond the point to change the warrant article. But other than the printing concern, it's not beyond the point to change the explanation. So I would suggest that people consider putting a budget in that explanation. And if I could go on to some of the reasons why. Could I ask you one question before I go on, Chris? When are the first O&M costs that we're going to have to actually pay for the IMA? Not for the 9 million, for the actual operation and maintenance portion of our piece of the Chatham treatment facility.
Yeah, it's when the pipes will actually be connected and we start sending flow, which I think is 2022.
Okay. I was hoping it was sooner, actually, but all right, FY '22.
And that's
So-
in the materials that you have, so
Right, I thought there might be something that made it sooner. So, when I read the explanation that's in now, I'm sorry, I gave all my, oh yeah. It's not clear to me. So let's say it was the end of 2021, and let's say we have 100 homes that are connected, and the final pipes are connected, so the 100 homes are actually flowing. What's not clear to me in this explanation is, would those 100 homeowners be actually paying some small fee, or would everybody wait, 5 or 10 years to pay in? It's just not clear.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and maybe I can try to create more clarity to that. I think once the flow happens, then by the IMA, we get a bill from Chatham. For every gallon we send, we have a charge that they'll send back to us. Under the agreement, the water department would get that bill from them, and then it's our obligation to set a rate to then recover that. So the individual homeowners, the material that we send to Chatham for some of the costs will be flow-driven.
Right.
And so we would match up, and everyone that's hooked up, as they're hooked up, would get a quarterly bill or semi-annual bill.
I'm actually happier to hear that, because I was not that happy to see somebody get a bill, but, I would hate for them to go many years and not pay a bill and not realize that, there was a portion of that they had some, onus for. So that takes care of one of my concerns. Okay, so my other concern goes back to the nature of the enterprise fund. I can only do it by example. If it was a general fund, and if we had a department that decided that they weren't going to need any office supplies next year, but the year after that, they were going to need an enormous amount. And if they were to put in $20,000 into their office supply line for money to be spent in FY '20, they would lose it. It would close at the end of the year and be gone.
That's correct.
So what I don't know is, so part of that $90,000 budget that hasn't been detailed, part is, I don't know, maybe a community project manager. I don't know what's in it. Maybe it's, some of it will be to compensate for the O&M costs that the people can't afford because there are too few of them. But if there are absolutely no O and M costs that are gonna happen in FY '19, I don't understand how it's legal to use our money from a raised tax rate to budget for a cost that we know isn't gonna happen. But that's because my only knowledge is of the general fund. I've never worked with a town that had an enterprise fund.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do here is, once we plug into Chatham, now we have an obligation that they'll charge us on the amount of flow, but then we have 23% of their plant costs. If their plant costs are $1 million, we automatically get $230,000 bill that's gonna come in. And it's at that stage, how do we have 100 people, let's say only 100 people are hooked up, pay $230,000? There's no way for that to happen.
Right.
So what we're trying to do here is, instead of having what I would call a fiscal shock in 2022, budget $230,000, I'm trying to build that in to the general property tax base to go, well, just if it's 90, 180, and then 270, gets us into the ballpark, so that way when we're ready to go. To your point, and I'm following you, I don't really have, my advice now is I'm trying to build it into the tax rate to avoid a shock later on. We know in that 2022, all the money that will be put in there, that 270,000 in the example I just gave, will be used to pay for the capital project, not capital project, the cost of the plant, our obligation for the cost of the plant. So we know that money is committed for something. Between now and 2022, I would recommend that we, I don't know how detailed of a budget I'm gonna be able to generate, but that the budget that we generate for the next couple years to build that up would be for things that we know can go away. Okay. And that we can transition the money from whatever that item is now to then transfer over. Just for folks, and I'm sure people are gonna be like, why is he talking about municipal finance so much? But if we have it as part of the tax base now and don't do the enterprise fund, as you already alluded to, at the end of the year, the 90,000 just goes back. We could theoretically do that. I think the better approach is what the selectmen had kind of pushed me towards, and I agree with this. By creating the enterprise fund gets trued up at the end of the year and becomes retained earnings. So it stays in that pocket. So that 90 will still be there. If we spend some of the 90, whatever the balance is, will be there. So when we start to connect up, you could take some of the edge off, because it's really gonna be the first couple years as we're connecting people in, where we will only have 100 or 150 people hooked up, but yet we'll have a charge that really is 1,000 people that we need to pay. So having that extra money on hand as part of retained earnings will help to lessen that.
And in theory, we're in complete agreement, and I don't wanna, get too deep into this, but every balance sheet I look at, everything from the Department of Revenue shows a budget. So it's still gonna be a portion of that 90,000, whatever it is. Let's say it's 50,000 for FY '19. You're still gonna be at the end of the year presenting to the Department of Local Services a budget that says 50,000 operation and maintenance costs, when we know that no operation and maintenance costs can possibly happen in FY '19. So
I think that just in terms of the DOR, I think they are somewhat reasonable people. And I think if we lay out, we don't have to go too far to see, Chatham's been doing this for at least 10 years. And they've been supplementing their enterprise fund through tax dollars to do it.
But was it for expenses that happened in that year?
I just made a note to myself, the next time I'm over there, I'm gonna ask what they did initially during that transition.
But you know my
phase.
concerns. I'm gonna let
I
it
do.
go there because it may be, a bit weedier, as you and I say, than things normally are. But I will close by saying that in the explanation, I truly think a simple budget that says 40,000 for this, 30,000 for this, because the comments I heard last night, I think there's about 10 people that think that fund is gonna pay for about 10 different things right now, so.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's something that we probably should have a conversation with the selectmen. We have the
Right.
budget meeting on Saturday, this coming Saturday. So certainly if, I mean, I have some ideas. We could pay some of the consulting services fees to do, do some of the material that you guys want.
I even heard,
Stuff that
I
can go
even
away,
heard
so.
subsidizing hookup costs suggested, so, I mean,
Yeah, unfortunately, last night, they put
But
me on the
that's-
spot, and I came up with a really bad example
you
to
did,
try to peddle.
you did. But, the explanation can still be changed, so I would say that's
Yes.
our best bet right now to get a budget in there. And that way, it will end the confusion 2 years from now about what was that 90,000 supposed to be for. Done.
Thank you.
All right. I have a couple of questions. Wow. When do you think that we will get a list of these approved utility installers, licensed ones? When, ours, not what Chatham used, but what we're
Yeah,
going to.
actually, one of the updates I should have done, and I apologize, is I have had some discussions with the health director, Megan Tierney, and, Eldridge.
Eldridge.
I'm sorry, she changed her name. It's tough enough for me to remember all the names. But Megan Eldridge, I had a meeting with her. She has it on for the Board of Health. And one of the things that they're looking at is a couple of issues. That being one, what role do they want to play? They do inspections now, so if there's a Title V inspection, it's the health agent that goes out and inspects the work. Is that something that, as the sewer connections are done, do we want to have the health agent go out and look at it? Really what that is the pipe sloped enough? And, I mean, they're looking at that already for septic purposes, so that's something that we're going to look at. So it may make some sense to use the existing resources we have. Somebody that goes out and looks at a pipe that slopes for a septic system probably could go out and look at a pipe that slopes for a sewer connection. So in terms of some of the mechanics of who's going to actually go out and look, that's something that we need to generate. So we are looking at that from a staff level. Because I know one of the questions that came up at the meeting was what is going to be the inspection fee that we'll charge. So whatever we charge for the septic inspection, we'll probably try to duplicate that to get us started. The other thing that I think is important for the Board of Health to kind of weigh in on is in the model from Chatham, it has a one-year connection. And what Chatham has indicated to us in some of the meetings is that it's taking people 2 years. It's just because there is a fair amount of activity and that it just takes longer to get contractors to come out and do the work. So what I've asked for Megan to kind of work on with the Board of Health is let's look at some of the questions that are going to come up. Is a year reasonable? Should it be 2 years? And then, the more important ones, and I had this happen to me, and I got to say, in my town that I lived, last town I lived in, there was zero compassion to people that had just put in a septic system and then had to have it taken out. And, I don't think that we should continue to duplicate a lack of compassion. So I have asked Megan to see, what is a reasonable timeline? And she's already gone out, she's looked, I think, at Falmouth, at Barnstable. I'm trying to think of a couple other models that she looked at. And what happens if we put the sewer line in and someone just a year ago put in a brand new septic system? Should they have to rip it out right at that moment? So we're trying to create a process in which people would go, I think because of the circumstances of each individual circumstance is really that individual, that the process that will be suggested in the sewer regs for the selectmen to consider would be to have an applicant come in before the Board of Health and talk about what their situation is. And perhaps that one, we have those people. I think ultimately everyone needs to hook up. If we're going to get rid of nitrogen from the environment, you need everybody to hook up. Do we need everybody to hook up within a year? Do we need everyone to hook up within 2 years? Or can a few people that have a brand new system maybe get 5 or 10 years of life out of it? So those are the discussions that they're starting to have. And then what happens if somebody has a failed system and the pipes are going to be 2 years out? How do we breach that 2 years to get through that and have the person be able to hook up? So I think it's questions like this that really are the domain of the Board of Health. I mean, they deal in the septic systems now. So they'll have to find a way to kind of help to make these people branch over and get to the sewer line. So they're having those discussions now. I think they have a meeting tonight, as a matter of fact, to kind of continue those discussions about how do they want to approach these things. The only thing I've really advocated for is that you can't tell people that, no, you don't have to hook up at all, because then you will have, everybody will want that. So, that's the only thing I've really indicated, that I think it is important to do. But I think those are decisions that the Board of Health has to consider. I think it makes some sense to try to get some of those views in front of the selectmen before town meeting. So some of those questions that people may have, we have some answers for.
Megan is going to be here on March 15th
Good.
to give us the information that she does have at that time. What I was actually getting at was the list of installers.
Yes. On the list of installers, we have been provided that. I think one of the things that we'll do, we have been provided the list from Chatham. I think I'll meet with Dan Pelletier, have him kind of do an initial vetting of those. That would be one. I think Dan would be, or the Water Department in particular, would be more knowledgeable. And then we can include that in the amendments to the rules and regs for the selectmen to consider.
All right.
It's already in there. We just need to provide the list that we'll have registered utility installers, I think is the term of art they use.
Yeah, all right,
I
yes.
think the first thing you need to do is define what the requirements are for a utility installer. Have we done that yet? What are the requirements the utility installer has to meet? I mean, that's the bottom line to me.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but we
Yeah.
will use the Chatham
Yeah, It's
example.
gotta just be a list that says.
And one of the
you know,
things that we did ask about the folks in Chatham, because I know we had this discussion, is how do you know or how do you vet? And they do update that list, and if they have somebody that's come in and has done poor work and it's been reported, they just take them off. So there'll be a mechanism to put them on and take them off. I think from my standpoint, you want a professional to kind of be able to vet through and see and make sure people know where to provide that feedback to.
Go ahead.
I did have a brief discussion with Dan about that specific issue, and it may be that utility installer is not a fixed definition. In other words, it's not going to be like, I am a certified electrician. So it might be useful to have what would be considered a utility installer in terms of what they can perform. That we actually define so that the homeowner can go down a punch list and say, so, blah, 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 blah. And let's say there are two that they're getting bids from, and one of them has a broader range or a better definition, if you will, that they can at least make a decision. It might affect the difference in the bids, for instance. So having a set of definitions that we create. Dan might be a good person to consult on that. I mean, it's a tough thing to ask him to do. But you know, if there is no formal definition of that, there is no actual certification, we should find out.
Yeah, I don't think this is like a plumbing inspector or an
No, it
electrical
isn't.
inspector.
But then what is
So,
it?
I mean, it is something that, as Chatham has developed what that utility installer is, we'll probably model on them. I mean, there's really only 3 or 4 towns on the Cape, you know, Falmouth, Barnstable, and Chatham, that really are engaged in this work now.
But
So it
having a
will be
set of
developing-
skills.
It will be a developing skill set.
Yeah, having a specific set of skill sets, and if any of those skill sets are certified, would be a good thing to know.
So I would like to add on to that question. Is Dan going to be the one that is going to field or come up with the requirements or, you know, that they have to fulfill? Will he be the one to do that and then do the interviewing as well for these
I don't know
people?
if it's gonna be interviewing, it'd be like an application
Or an
process
application,
now,
all right,
you know,
yeah.
it'd probably be an application process. Most likely, I mean, just as I stand here now, it would be the Water Department, because they do that work, and potentially the Board of Health also, you know, what process do they have? It could be a team, you know, those 2 departments that work in cooperation to make sure that people know where to vet. But we will initially use, which I think makes sense, because Chatham's been in this business for 10 years, so they have a 10-year track record of their installers. And Chatham's a small town, so the installers aren't just local to Chatham. I mean, you'll have people that are from Harwich that already are doing work in Chatham.
So is there a timing of when, let's say, the Board of Health and, let's say, Dan would be getting together and getting this started? I mean, you're not, like, when is this planned?
Yeah, I haven't established a timeline. Certainly,
All
that's
right.
something I can give some thought to and see.
Excuse me, don't they have to know the slope before they can really proceed to step one? In other words, when the map is finalized the end of March or beginning of May, that would be the first possible. They can't tell a plumber, you know, what the slope is from the street. So, right now, today, they couldn't.
No, I'm not.
Right, no, that's what I'm
Yeah,
just-
I'm not asking, you know, for them to be able to go to the people's homes. I'm saying having Dan and the Board of Health deciding who is going to be on those list of installers.
Yeah.
And that can be done before.
Yeah, we've kind of started that process. I've had discussions with both, you know, at least department-wise, to start having those discussions about
All right.
how we start to
So
consider
that has
these
been
issues.
started. All right, good, good. You had a question?
Chris, another question on the installers. If we put an installer on our list, does the town assume some kind of legal obligation if there's a suit against that installer?
No. There is, I'm trying to remember, it just goes back a while, but there's as a sovereign government, there is some tort immunity that we have. So we have an immunity of liability. And Massachusetts is pretty far and wide that we have that. Probably about 20 years ago, maybe even longer, some of those elements, you can't just do whatever you want and be irresponsible. So the law has changed, or the interpretation of the law has changed, and there are some circumstances where some liability can be created. But we'll certainly vet through that, and we'll use that sovereign immunity as much as we're able to. And again, this is really, and that's why I don't want to get into an interview and background checks. I mean, we're just going to do, is the person capable of doing the work and have the skill sets to do it, and now he's on a list of approved installers. So, you know, it's a little different standard. I mean, if we were hiring a plumbing inspector as an employee, we do background checks. But just to have a certified list, I don't think we would get necessarily that deeply into people's personal stuff.
It's important, and I think you just said it, Chris, to differentiate between approved and recommended. We're not recommending contractors, that's not our job. That's for the general public. We provide a list of those that are approved to do this kind of work. And it's up to them to sort out, I want to call one, I want to call seven, I want to do this. And that's part of what these homeowner associations and whatnot are going to be getting into. It's also going to be interesting, a little bit complicated, because the guy who is the utility installer is basically going to lay the pipe. That's what he's going to do. Okay, but he's going to do that, he or she is going to do that based on the engineering work that's done that everybody has to do, which is the first thing that has to be done. You have to have a design. But there'll be those cases where the homeowner will also need a plumber and maybe an electrician, depending on, you know, the complication of their system and what needs to be done. In some cases, the utility installers may have those services available as part of what they do. In other cases, they may say, I'm running the pipe, you have to get your own electrician, oh, by the way, you have to get your own plumber, and then the homeowner has to do that coordination. So there's gonna be, you know, there's gonna be the baseline definition of what the, you know, what these utility installers do, but they may in and of themselves offer some additional services.
Then I have a question, because then I'm not understanding this. So the utility installer is going to be the one that would connect the pipes from the streets or the roads to the home versus a plumber?
The design is done. A professional engineer does the design.
All right.
It says the pipe is this big, here's the elevation, you know, here's where you connect it in the house. In the simple case, let's just say you're, like the one I showed when we were showing my house, the pipe comes out the front, okay? Well, based on the elevation of where that pipe is and where the sewer line of the street is, the utility installer, based on the design, is gonna connect that with a 6-inch
All
pipe.
right, okay.
That's simple. And, you know, there's probably a backflow preventer, whatever. But he's gonna do that. In the complicated version, well, let's say a pump is needed, a grinder pump. They're gonna install the pipe set the grinder pump, I assume, and connect to it, but there are electrical connections that have to come to it. There's an alarm that, if I remember correctly, that, you know, sits on the exterior side of the house, et cetera, that an electrician's gonna have to do.
Right.
Unless the utility contractor has that skill set on his team. Now, he may say, my preferred electrician is Fred, and that's what people use. I mean, the homeowner's gonna wanna look for one-stop shopping, just to make it easier. But think about the case somebody mentioned where their pipe is coming out the back of their house, and someone, I know in our discussion, said, well, you know, you could rearrange it if you got the room in your house and the elevations are right, to come out, inside the house, you change that pipe so it comes out the front, and it makes it, potentially, the installation, you know, easier. In my understanding, that interior work would typically be a plumber. It wouldn't be the utility installer. He's gonna deal with the pipe coming out the foundation, typically. So there are gonna be complicating factors here that need to be addressed.
And there's the big deal of the finished and unfinished basement, and whether the pipe sizes connect. So there's going to be a fair number of variables, but you're correct in, you know, what's basically being said here with, is that you're going to hire someone to dig a hole, put a pipe in, connect on both ends, but connecting on the house end may require considerable variables, from plumber to electrician to interior work, so.
And I'll give you an example. So you talked about the deck before.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone is thinking about putting a deck in the back of their house, and let's say their current septic system is in the back. They may go get a plumber today and say, hey, is it possible for me within my house to reroute this thing so eventually it comes out the front? And what would that cost? And then they can make a determination, okay, I wanna go build that deck, or I wanna do something different to the
I
deck.
guess my question is, so that the people would possibly need a utility installer and a plumber and electrician?
Yes,
All right. Okay.
Yeah,
and a landscaper
And by the way, a professional engineer to do their
Yeah,
design,
all right.
first and foremost. I
All
mean,
right.
I do think one of the things that Chatham is seeing is that in the marketplace, the company that comes in and puts the pipe in the street are developing crews that are also licensed utility installers. So they come back, and when they put the laterals in, that goes from the edge of it goes from the middle of the street to the edge of the street, they may offer to homeowners, if they're already in the area, they already have the crews, they're already putting the pipes in, you know, they may say to the homeowner, do you want me to do this for you? So I think you're gonna see that more and more
All right.
as more towns come online, that there'll be more offerings as these companies come in and install the pipes.
All right.
And there are other things you might be able to do in advance, for instance, with the deck issue, where it might require tearing off a deck, there's some possibility of putting a pipe in the existing pipe. So that, now, whether you want to do that technically becomes an issue that certainly I'm not able to determine, but it is something that if you're having your septic system emptied in the near future, you might want to have that person figure out the gauge of your connecting pipe. They can actually determine that, what goes under the deck. They can look at where it comes into the septic system and get the size.
Well, and if I could, just again, as you mentioned before, every homeowner can come right here to the window on the second floor and ask for what's on file for their septic system. And a reasonable plan, unless this thing is an antique, will show what the pipe size is and detail those things. And, you know, as I said, I think it's $3.50 to make a nice copy for you, and at least you have it to deal with, so, or work with.
They won't show it from the septic system to the house necessarily, the size of
Oh,
it.
They'll go from the house out to the field.
Yeah, they should, yeah.
All right, and then I only have one other question for you on this. Do you know when we can get a date from CDM Smith, when they might make that presentation in April?
I can find out from them what
All right.
they're thinking.
All right. All right. Any further discussion? Anybody from the audience out there? All right. Okay, the discussion on outreach and local banks. You guys are up.
Okay. Short and sweet. So it was suggested that the committee reach out to some of the banks that have premises in Harwich and, you know, maybe facilitate the process of putting the homeowners and some of the lending institutions together for folks that may not be interested in the county loan program or some of the other things. So Chris and I took that on, and to date, we have met with 2 of the banks, and we have another appointment next week, and another one is still looking into some information. The banks were very happy that we reached out to them, and a couple would be interested in possibly coming to one of our televised evening or morning sessions and giving a brief presentation for the people. Some are looking into what lending products they have and if they could possibly gear them a different way. Some would just be presenting, you know, whatever existing products they have. So we will keep the committee updated. That kind of information probably wouldn't be ready probably till May, especially given that CDM would probably take the April slot for a meeting also. And the banks need their time to turn things around a little bit. But the other piece of information that we picked up in talking to the banks is that the county septic program is looking better and better. And I say that in terms of the fact that the rates are going up anyway, so they're starting to meet the ease of the program, and also the fact that, not an expert on the county septic program, but it seems as though that amount gets put right on the tax bill, which certainly, if that is true, once it's verified, that would make it deductible from their income tax, because no tax accountant is going to separate their real estate portion from their betterment portion. So even with the tax change, I'm all weeds today, even with the tax changes going on, that would most likely continue to be a deduction.
You don't realize the IRS watches this program on TV,
They talk to me at night.
along with other things, right?
Whereas loans from the banks are in question right now. Lines of credit may not be deductible from taxes anymore. Some are, some aren't. It's just a quagmire of information in terms of what will happen. So at any rate, I mentioned that to Sharon and to Caleb, and what we might do is carve out from the July 24th Board of Selectmen's meeting, when you had the presentation on the county septic loan, we'll have Caleb, if possible, carve out that piece of the presentation so we can put it on our website and make that easily available. And over the next few months, we may have them back and have another presentation. So that's where we are with that, and Chris and I will continue to meet with these banks and let you know what's going on.
Okay. I just want to point out that, again, it's our job to provide information, not to try and steer a homeowner in a certain direction.
Absolutely.
So, you know, if we say things like a bank might not be as good as the county, yeah, it's up for them to decide,
Right.
the homeowner. But I would ask for the bank.
Thank you for.
No, but for the bank's purposes,
clarifying that.
because it could sound like we're starting, trying
Right.
to promote stuff. From the bank purposes, would they have access, or if a bank came in and said, can we get the mailing list just for the same list that we're mailing these people to? Can that be provided to the bank, and then they can go off and send their own materials out however they want to do it? If that will be available to them, I mean.
That would be.
And then let them go do it, have fun. I mean, homeowners get things all the time from folks soliciting things, but if they decided they wanted to, try and target that audience.
No, I will say that they haven't asked about mailing lists, but that's an excellent point. But to expand on the point you made, which is critical, Peter, I appreciate you saying it, because when I was saying the county loan program looks better, what I should have said was that everybody's situation is different. And, to some who might decide, while I'm doing this, I'm going to add a bathroom in my basement, then to them, a line of credit or a second mortgage might be the perfect vehicle. Whereas the person who wants the simple example you had come in the front, and that's how I should have explained the situation, is that they're equal products depending on the people's circumstances for them to sort out.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I did say something to Jamie last evening about the section that you wanted on the July 24th
Correct.
all right? She said if you look at it and you give them the time frame
Okay,
that she said it would be easy to pull out.
okay.
So if you've already identified where that is, I'll let that up to you. All right,
Madam Chairman?
yes.
I would just add on to what Peter said. At this time, if I was a homeowner, I would do as much as I can in terms of homework. The website for the county is very, very user-friendly, and you can get a head start on that today. And if you have a local banker that you've had a relationship with over the years, there's nothing to stop you from having an initial discussion about this loan that you're going to need, perhaps.
Do you happen to have the website for the,
Yes, I do.
yes, you do, good.
Capital S, excuse me, capital CSMLP.org. Those letters stand for the Community Septic Management Loan Program of Barnstable County. If you go into the Barnstable website, Barnstable County website, it'll come up pretty quickly.
All right.
Excuse me, but, I got it through this one.
Yeah, you could do it that way, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just Google the county, and it's on the front page.
Pardon me?
It's right on the website.
Yeah.
If you just Google Barnstable County, I think that's one of their icons on the very front page. You go to the sewer. So it's pretty simple. To Noreen's point on getting closer together, about a year ago, I asked the county how many people took advantage of the septic program, and I was told that not a lot. And the reason is that the way it's funded, the county's rate was significantly higher than what you could get with your local bank. And to Noreen's point, we all read the paper that interest rates are rising. So all of a sudden, you know, the county's where it is because it's funded by a separate fund, but the bank's rates are going up. So I think it'll become much more attractive going forward. But, you know, it's narrowing.
If I could just ask you, Madam
Sure.
Chair, Larry, do you know, is there a limitation on how much the county can do? In other words, can they only do $2 million, or, I mean, in total?
I'm certain there is, but I don't know what that number is. Because it's it's basically a pass-through from the federal government on the money that's allotted, so I'm not sure what that is. Okay, thank you, Chris. About 16 million is what,
In total or yearly?
in total. But it's a revolving fund, depending on what the federal government does. And also, it's somewhat sustained because people are paying back the loans as well.
All right, any further questions on this? All right, I just lost okay, let's move on to the website reorganization. I sent out, these were, again, preliminary suggestions, and Noreen sent something out, and I don't think that went out to everybody, did it?
No, I
No.
only sent it to you.
And you have copies of it.
This
Yeah. All right, and
this
these were,
is Noreen's work product?
pardon?
This is what Noreen sent?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, these,
I did not get it.
And this is what you sent?
yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, I don't think I sent it out, 'cause my system was down, I think, when you sent that.
Yeah, I was just being careful of open meeting rules, so I only sent it to you. So mine is the one that says WW contact at the top.
Okay. All right, so we have her suggestions to include in this.
I'll explain mine real
Go
quick
ahead.
if you want.
Go ahead.
Okay, so,
Excuse me, can I just understand, does this take the place of this?
No.
Or this is meant to go into this?
okay, so, I was looking at what I felt were the first three, top categories, so it doesn't take the place of the whole thing, but my suggestions were that these be the first 2 or 3 categories. And, that somewhere on our website, we have our contact email, and whatever other kinds of, and these are just suggestions, we do whatever we want, but it seems like, you know, right now, how to hook up, you know, would be up top. And what I did was I went back to the existing True website, and I tried to pull the documents from there and put them in the categories easily understandable that they found. This was just my take on it. So I grouped the existing categories from the website into these three categories: East Harwich, how to hook up. These titles certainly could be phrased better. East Harwich, hookup cost information would be a possible second one, and a possible third one would be townwide project and cost information. So I was just trying to get some of those issues right up near the top. The only other suggestions I had for Karen were that, I'm sorry, Sharon, were that on her list, she had 7 or 8 or 5 or 6 topics at the end of hers that were the list of Allen Harbor, Herring River, et cetera, et cetera. And I suggested that we take those 7 categories and put them into a category called harbors, ponds, and rivers. So they would all be in one rather than us having like 25 categories. And the only extra step I went was there were a few documents on the website which, you know, I didn't know if they should be there anymore. And one, Chris, I would have to ask you to look into. It was the letter from KP Law dated April 24th about financing of sewer connections. And what it talks about is a town program of betterments, and we're no longer going in that direction. So, you know, things like that, I thought, you know, we can't go through each document, but I thought anything like that, if we've made a decision we're not going in that direction, we should maybe pull it. So maybe you could look into that one sometime?
On the site, you mean?
From the, yes, from the existing website, and you can have this copy if that helps you, but,
Wait a minute, are you one of the sick ones?
Yeah. You notice we have them staggered?
This side of the table is perfectly fine. I don't know what's going on over there, but
well, Chris is our test. It's kind of like the canary.
stuck
buffer,
But
I
he
think,
came
yeah.
in fine,
Yeah.
so we'll see how he is next meeting.
3 days from now.
So that's all I did, but, I mean, anybody's ideas are good. I was just doing a little prioritizing, that's all.
Yeah, I particularly think this is a good approach, because it allows people to go deeper with the ones you've suggested, but as we know, people have a tendency to go to the top 3.
Right.
It's what you go to first. A lot of people give up sooner rather than later. And I also think the how to hook up cost, and maybe the third title needs something that will get people's attention a little bit more. But I really, the only thing that we might want to change is have East Harwich / Pleasant
Right,
Bay,
yeah.
so that the
Anything.
terminology is continuous, so that the letters we send out match what is on the website. But I think this is a particularly good approach just for answering the largest amount of questions, and we can also add something. So if it's approved, the booklet approach with all the internal stuff could be just added as a
Right.
bullet point. So, but that's my 2 cents.
I think too, Ann, when you ask a question in a title, it may get your attention and pull you in a lot faster as opposed to like a statement of fact.
Absolutely correct.
The other thing too was I happened to catch, Chris, you're talking with the town administrator, episode 35, and, not that serious.
Revision 7.
And it was really excellent on telling people, well, you know, now we might add the top of 137, and for these reasons, that we don't have to dig up the whole street twice and stuff like that. I asked Caleb this morning if some of those episodes could be like retitled. In other words, if you have a list that says, Sitting with the Town Administrator, episode 35, probably not gonna get a lot of hits. you know.
Yeah,
But,
I think whatever Caleb's able to do, I mean,
Right.
if you could pull those out and put those into the ones that are on topic.
Right, but I mean, if we can retitle that, you know, discussion of streets to be included in phase two, you know what I mean, something like that, so, that's an idea too.
So will Caleb be the one doing all this?
I don't know.
I mean,
Most likely.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
have to,
He's shaking his head yes.
yeah, so we have to decide exactly on how you want to position these, and then either I can sit down or somebody else can sit down with Caleb and go over it.
is this, we'll put Caleb on the spot, is this like a giant project, or is this something that gets done very quickly? I don't know.
I don't know how quickly that would take. The other thing that I really wanted to do, and I did not get it done because I did not feel well, is the links on the side of the
website.
the wastewater button.
Yeah.
All right. Put those links to be whatever titles we have here. In other words, if you're going to say East Harwich, Pleasant Bay, how to hook up, then that would be, in other words, the left side would be like a table of
It's a
contents.
tab, yeah, it's
Yeah.
a tab.
It would be a table of contents that would take you to that topic, and then these would fall underneath it. Rather than having scattered topics out there that don't really seem to fit into anywhere.
Understand.
So,
My suggestion is, Madam Chair, that you take that on and sit down with Caleb and see what you can get done. No, seriously, see what you can get done.
all right, I don't mind doing that, then I need to
Bring it
sit
back.
down
I
with,
just don't want to, I don't want us generating,
Right.
going through this 12 times, because he's a limited resource, I'm assuming.
Right.
So.
right,
You know, one thing, I didn't go through the whole list, but like not every document we should have on the thing is currently on it. So
You're right.
before we even meet with Caleb, or before you meet with Caleb, you know, we have to pull those together. I can't find the fact sheet that was presented at the January 16, 2018 meeting. I didn't happen to get one, and I just can't find it. That's one we need. Some of us have the list of the 60 homes, but that's not currently on the website, the Chatham homes and costs. But somebody needs to tick down the rest of this list, you know, just to make sure they've been kind of accounted for, you know, one way or the other. And then the other categories like Chatham IMA, Section 208 plan, I mean, they're fine as they are for now. We can always revisit that, you know, later on. But somebody needs to do a little double checking in between, like, this to this, and did we,
most of, as far as I know, when I put this together, this included everything that was on the website.
right.
All right, there's things that are not on there that still need to be on there, like the street listing. And right now, we only have a preliminary, but there's no reason we can't put the preliminary on there, and when we get the final, substitute it with the final.
Could I make a suggestion on that? Just my opinion, but we're so close to the final. By the time you do this with the IT personnel, it would be a couple of weeks. So now we're talking the 26th. The final is, you know, days after that. We're so close to a final.
Are we going to have a final listing by,
Updated listing.
I thought they had said the end of March.
all right,
Well, at any rate, it's part of the piece that says what we have learned anyway. There's a preliminary listing included in that one, so I don't think there's any need to highlight it with the final coming right behind it.
yeah. So there's a couple of things, so everything that is on the website is included here, but there are things that are not on the website that are more current that we wanted to add.
We need to develop a comprehensive list. Perhaps everybody can basically say what they want and then cross-check back to what's there and see what's missing. Or mistitled,
Right.
because some of the things are very hard to determine from a
Well,
generic.
I've done, some of that I've said, there was one here under financial, it says wastewater financial handout. I said change to what will protecting your water resources cost, because that is the title of the document that's there. So if you want to go with that, or you have other ideas, you know, we can,
I think we kind of need to beat this up a little bit
Yeah.
right now, because otherwise, 2 more weeks and 2 more weeks, it
Yep.
just doesn't get, so
Yep.
I'll go right ahead and tick down some if you want, and we can.
Go ahead.
So, under a better titled first category for how to hook up, where did I get the first one? What does it mean when my residential property is connected to the sewer? So I must have pulled that from someplace. Oh, that was from the old fact sheet. And it's still good. The only thing that bothered me about it is it uses the word contractor, but it's still a good document, you know.
was that a
contra-
Q and
con-
A? That's a Q and A, though.
Contractor could be either, you know, professional engineer or utility installer, but at any rate, it's a good document. That's the first one. The second one is, if we want it, I mean, not necessarily the first one, you know, the old map that we all refer to with the pink for now, the project timeline, certainly, the new project timeline. What we have learned is the document Peter put together, the January 16th presentation, that, from 2018, the sewer regs, and by the sewer regs, I mean what they call the highlights. I was calling it summary, but the highlights is the 2-page of the, I mean, if people want the whole sewer regs in, speak up, but.
In the back.
Now, I don't know if we really want to put the Falmouth document in there. I don't think we do. That's why I have so many question marks there.
I would take that as a reference document to go somewhere else,
Right.
maybe, you know.
Plus, we'll have our
If
own,
somebody really
yeah.
wants to find it.
So I would
Because
try.
we're not adopting that necessarily
yeah.
verbatim, so
Yeah.
there could be some misinformation or people
Mm-hmm.
might misunderstand at some point.
And then if we could retitle the sitting with the town administrator episode I talked about, that had a lot of information on hooking up and what streets. That's a possibility. Can anybody think of any other documents that should be under for the moment, how to hook up? We can certainly add them later.
Well, one you'd want to put in there is when we do get this updated list of what are the actual streets or
Right.
homes, you want to put that in there. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
one of the first things you want to do. How do
Yeah.
I know if I am affected? I mean, something like that.
In the finalized map, we can just replace the map with the.
Right.
So that sounds like a semi-done deal for now.
And what's the title for that one?
Well, what do you like?
I like the how to hook up.
That was
as
just
well.
me
I
working
really-
at a computer.
You know, I think it's colloquial and to the point, and as you said, a question. And that really does, it really is basic and
All
very
right, well, then,
clear.
would you consider the sewer regulations under how to hook up?
Yes. For some people, it would be.
I think that might be something we put in a couple of categories, to tell you the truth. Nothing wrong with
Yeah.
doing that.
All right, all right.
It answers the question for people who now have a septic system and think it's a sewer, which there are quite a few.
So however you phrase that with the / Pleasant Bay to be for consistency, and that's a start. So then next we have East Harwich / Pleasant Bay, is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
And then hook up cost information. So I'm suggesting that we have the community septic loan, frequently asked questions, the community septic loan application, the community septic presentation from July 24th of 2017, once we isolate that piece that I talked about. Okay? And then the list of the 60 Chatham home costs, which some of the public expressed an interest in. Just suggestions.
I think the last one has to be there because it's the accurate base for the cost estimate. It allows some people to say, oh, that it basically says it's only 60 homes from a given year, and so it may be different from me, but it's a base cost. I would like to see that information updated, but I don't really see there's any way to do it.
I think you just have to be a little bit careful. It's a very small sample size
It's a very
relative to
small
what's been hooked up. And we relied on people responding to a survey. So, you know, I'm guessing some of the, I mean, the folks that were probably hit the hardest are the ones that filled out the form and said, okay, this thing cost me, I'm making up a number, $24,000, you know.
No, I agree completely. At one of the meetings you were in here, Peter, the public did ask for it, and
Yeah.
Chris said he was gonna put it on the website. so
It's
seems-
available. I mean,
Yeah.
it should be made available, no doubt about it.
The size, even though it's small, is important for the people who go the other direction, which will say, oh, it's only going to cost me $5,000. You know, it gives them a range, and
does that.
that's important. People have to then question what the difference is in that range.
And that doesn't mean that there aren't other things on either Sharon's list or the wastewater, the website list that, you know, should go in here. Please, use your eyes and, it's so much. It's just so much.
Yeah, and the title of the third one, I think you were talking about tweaking it, and I think it would also, to Chris's comment, to put in something like townwide project costs and then actually lay out taxes calculator, long-term finances, or something along those lines, so that people can say, oh, that's where the calculator is, and
I'm fine with any suggestions. This would just be the section for people to go to who were not being at least immediately sued or maybe never sued.
a lot of people from past meetings over the last couple of years, when that wastewater tax calculator came up, a lot of people visited it, and especially where this is a second home, people who have other areas of the state where they have very high water taxes found, you know, we're doing comparisons with this local tax, so.
I would say on the townwide project thing that it's, at some point in there should be a little matrix, and it says 3 titles. Phases, 1 through whatever, or wherever we are
true.
today, 2 through whatever.
Yeah.
The area affected, whether it's, you know, West Harwich or Herring River, whatever it is, and then what the timeline of that particular phase is. Like, there could be folks in Harwichport sitting there, you know, oh, I know okay, I'm in there, but it doesn't happen for 15 more years. I'm making that up, don't hold me to it, but, you know, just so it gets your attention if it says
Yes.
tomorrow.
You know what I have, and I can't believe I don't have it with me, but I have 3 pages from the CWMP that between those, or actually might even have it down to 2 pages, between those 2 pages, they give you the whole outline. I
Right,
always
right,
carried them with me.
right.
One is the phases and the amounts, one is the phases and the years and the sections, so I could
That's
certainly
priceless.
Make one
supply
spreadsheet
those.
or whatever.
And, you know, I've been
Yeah, it is
carrying
one.
those for how many years, Larry? A long time.
But that would be helpful, I think.
Okay, I'll provide
Because, you know,
that.
if you take the whole CWMP, it's like, I can't even, if I'm looking for something, it's like, okay, I gotta start digging through this. It's all there, you gotta find it.
So let me ask a question. With the open meeting law regulations, could 2 or 3 people get together and sit down and come up with a format that they want to use here? Is that,
2 can, unless you want a,
This is an expert right here.
yeah.
okay,
Not an expert exactly, but I think you could get together and discuss it and then bring it back for a vote.
right, right.
And as long as you don't take any action, it's informational.
You don't
Yeah.
take any votes, you
I-
don't take any action.
And just bring it back on the next agenda to
Yeah.
discuss and go over it. Think you're okay?
So you think 3 can, she said 2 or 3?
I think if you're asking for information on this case, you can do that. Just don't make a decision.
Yeah, because there aren't any decisions
And
being
you
made.
aren't, you know, it's basically a fact-finding at this point.
All right. Okay, good.
And I suppose the alternative to that is to parse it out in sections and have 2 people work on one section and 2 on
No,
another.
that's not going to work. That's not going to work, because now you're going to have these 2 people looking at taking it and putting it here, and 2 people looking at doing it there, and now you're going to have to get together anyway and come up with it. So I think 2 or 3 people getting together and coming up with a
Yeah.
format for this.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea, but I think the first idea is how's it gonna flow?
Yeah.
Maybe
No,
once you do
I'm-
that,
yeah.
and then maybe you could get together and look at sections and be sure everything's included in the
Yeah.
section.
No, I'm familiar with the flow sheets that are used to design websites, so. I hate them.
I'd like to take a look at it, too.
Didn't I give you one?
Uh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You meant
There,
that.
there's probably one up here. All right, so who would like to get together and go over this? There's that one, and then does he have the other one?
I have time constraints, so,
Yeah, you don't.
no, I
don't
mean in
think you-
terms of getting together, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think you have this one, though, the larger one, and I don't have. Yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. So, who would like to get together and work on them?
I have time constraints coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Okay,
I'm out of town until the 23rd. I'm coming back for our meetings, but I'm out
all
of
right,
town the rest of the
so. Peter?
So,
I'll-
Madam Chair, what I would suggest is, I know you have always expressed an interest in the website.
Yeah,
So I'd be happy to sit down with you
Okay.
at your convenience, once you're over this dreaded disease you have. And you get it,
that I'm not
you get an all-clear
contagious.
certification from the Surgeon General.
So we want that in the minutes, that
Yes.
she's healthy?
I would be
All right,
more than happy to sit down with you,
All
and
right.
let's see if we can't work something out
All right.
and come back with something to
all
look
right.
at.
Would you
I
like to,
mean, I'm happy to contribute a little, I can't commit for more with a house full of company, so.
yeah, so would you like to join us?
Yeah, I
Good,
will.
all right. All right, hopefully this is passing quick, whatever it is.
Well, next week would be probably a good
Yeah.
time. I mean,
Yeah, all right.
One other thing there's no mention of is the role that the county plays in this. Is that important on our website to push the audience into the 208 plan?
Oh, she's got it.
Oh, and when you,
Does she?
Yeah. So I was suggesting that after these topics, then they flow into these, and we have one there.
Oh, okay. Okay, great, okay.
So this was Sharon's, that was
Yeah.
the 3 pages.
all I did was,
And then
I
the
took
third
what was,
page would be grouping, but you guys can work out.
what I did was I took what was on the website,
Yeah.
and I fit everything that was on the website into categories to start with,
Yeah.
all right?
I would suggest a link to the county, but I wouldn't want to get into that in depth because there's a lot of confusion on that. People mistakenly think the 208 offers a plan to Harwich. It doesn't. It lays a format, some criteria that we have to adhere to, but the plan has to come from Harwich. And there's, I think, a link so people want to refer to it, but I would make sure, I would put all the concentration on what we're doing.
listen, now in the execution phase, if someone wants to argue about, why is this happening in the first place, you can reference those things and send them there. But we're way beyond that at this
Yeah,
point in time,
Yeah,
And I would think the people facing in the next 4 or 5 years, connecting to the system, they want to know, what does it mean to me?
yes.
They probably don't want to pay too much attention about, well, there's some lawyers doing this and, blah, 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 and
Yeah.
this happened.
I might add, the county is, they're focused now on, they have to, when they comply to the regulations, they have to be sure that our plans are consistent with the overall DEP requirements. So as Ann's brought it up, I know several times, has to be, we have to show that we're handling, how we're structuring the costing to be fair to people, give low-income people a chance and all that. They're taking the role of trying to do a countywide water monitoring program to enforce what's going on. And their biggest role has been from day one and continues to be is how can they help us muscle up to get funding from state and federal governments. So they do a lot of that type of work as well.
All right.
Madam
All right,
Chair, I have
so-
to leave in about 5 minutes, so I don't know if you get something burning on here that we need to get next.
Calendar.
Oh, the calendar. Oh, all right. I thought I gave everybody March, April, and May.
You did.
I have that.
All right. The 15th, all right.
Of
I did
March?
speak with, yes, I did speak with Megan Eldridge, and she is going to come in and give whatever information she has or what they're working on, at least give us an update on that.
So we'll just do a Q&A plus Megan for that meeting, that's
Yeah.
fine, yeah.
All right.
And I understand Chris Harlow won't make that meeting, so we do have a quorum beyond that.
Okay, you won't be here.
I will not be here.
Okay, no Chris.
Okay.
All right. Then we have the next one on the 20th, and I think everybody's in on that.
Yes.
All right, we go to April. We have that one, the 3rd,
Yep.
and then I do have my situation listed there. The 12th. Oh, that's the Chamber of Commerce meeting. That Cindy Williams is putting on, and she's going to be covering some wastewater. I think it's marijuana and wastewater.
Well, I'll be on vacation.
Which came first?
It's like. So I don't know if somebody,
Wow.
I'll be on vacation.
all right, and yeah. All right, you're on vacation.
I will be
And
at that
I
meeting.
will be here on the 12th of April.
Okay, you'll be here.
I'll be around, but is that just the, is that the regular monthly meeting, or is that a
No,
special meeting?
that's just some,
Oh, I
yeah.
won't be here,
Is
actually.
that the one at the church?
I don't know where she has him.
Got a doctor's appointment.
Says community center.
All right, I do have that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, so that's not really our meeting, but I think it would be good if somebody was there. The 12th isn't,
Well, is the chamber gonna have their own presentation on wastewater?
yeah, I think she's going to present something on wastewater, because
Really?
we're not supposed to be
Okay,
doing it.
well,
But I think somebody should
I'll
be there.
attend.
All right, all right,
Questions come up, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
all
Or
right,
send some materials if you like.
yeah, all right. Now, the 17th of April, we almost have to reschedule because Ann's not going to be here, and
Can I
Noreen's not.
suggest-
Pardon?
Can I suggest something?
Go ahead.
Okay, so, we definitely can't have that meeting because there's only 2 people here. But for the 3 people that are going to be here through the rest of April, who will be Peter, Chris Harlow, and myself, I would suggest that we don't schedule that meeting until we know the date of the CDM meeting. Because we
Oh,
may
all right.
want to have one, the 3 of us may want to schedule our second April meeting to be a couple of days after the CDM meeting, should questions come up
All
or
right.
whatever, rather
right.
than before.
All
you
right,
know.
so that one just needs to be rescheduled, but,
and we will look forward to the vice chair coordinating that.
That's right.
So that
yes.
We will.
we'll figure it out.
And the 19th one isn't, I mean, that will be, the 19th will be replaced by the CDM April meeting.
Right.
So there is no
All right.
April 19th meeting.
All right, so that, what you're saying is that could replace that? Yeah, all right,
Well, especially with people away, I think
Yeah.
we have to.
yeah.
I'm
I
not
don't-
gonna be here that week.
And also, I wouldn't want to encourage the public to go to 2. I want them to go to the CDM meeting, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think we should have any evening meeting in April because of that. We should put our focus on getting them to the CDM meeting.
All right. So what we're saying, we'd have the one on the 3rd.
And then Chris Harlow will schedule one other in April
All right,
at his
all right,
choosing.
yes.
Okay.
He's thinking, okay. All right,
How about the 24th? Can I get a quorum for the 24th?
I'm not here on the 24th.
24th of what?
April.
April.
You can get me there.
I'm out from the 15th through early May.
Yeah, I would be there, but
I'm in Crete.
that might be the night that is the CDM meeting.
So we'll just have to wait.
Yeah,
So let's wait and find out when the
Yeah.
CDM, and then you
Right.
guys can,
Okay.
A month and a half away, we don't have to.
yeah, all right. But then obviously you'll have to check for rooming.
Right.
All right,
So May
All right, so we're
1st.
saying basically the 17th and the 19th right now are off the table.
Right.
Until we, all right.
Right.
All right, those are going to be rescheduled and filled in with.
The 19th isn't going to be rescheduled.
It's, I mean,
Right.
but another meeting in April will be rescheduled
CDM,
for
yeah.
CDM Smith.
Right.
All right.
I could do I mean, if you want to really bunch them together, Chris, I could do the 10th.
Yeah, that's,
Of April? But we still wouldn't know, well, I'm not here then, so you wouldn't have
Oh,
a
well.
quorum anyway.
No, I think-
Yeah,
Oh, I
why
didn't
don't we
have that
wait
on
till we
there.
know CDM's,
All right.
no, thank you.
yeah, I didn't have that you weren't here on that one.
All right, with that, I
Which
must
one?
depart.
All
So
right.
May 1st is fine, right?
Okay,
So Madam Chair, I'm gonna count on you to get a hold of me when you're ready to do something with the website.
I will do that. I'll get
And
it.
hopefully it'll be something for next week.
Yes, it'll be next week,
Okay.
definitely.
All right.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm still going
Well,
down this.
yes,
May
all right.
1st and May
Well,
15th.
if you come down with something, call me.
Anybody
and let
else
me know,
not
so
here?
I know whether I need to avoid her more.
So we have the,
Peter, are you here May 1st and May 15th?
I am.
okay,
Good.
I am too.
all right, so
All right.
those
I'm
meetings
here
will
on the,
hold.
it shows me on vacation on the 15th. I'm on vacation on not back on the 8th. I have to double check on the 15th. So
Okay.
May 8th, I am available if I'm lucky, but that would be pushing it.
That's town
that's-
meeting. I doubt
Oh.
very much that we're going to be
Oh, all right.
interested in.
You'll be meeting those.
That's right.
All right,
All right.
But thank you.
I'm remote voting, so.
all right. So then, Ed, I think after that, you can kind of work on when you think the meetings
Okay.
will work. All right, since the hour is getting late,
I'd like to say something, if I
Okay.
could, under announcements.
sure.
So, the Dennis Harwich Yarmouth group that is looking into consolidating our wastewater services for the western part of Harwich is having, I guess, a pretty important meeting on March 22nd at 6 PM at the Dennis Council on Aging. And that's a public meeting. And somewhere, I've actually found their agenda for it, and apparently they've been meeting for, a year or so, doing some great work, and, I get the impression this is a fairly significant meeting, so if people wanted to attend that to find out how that piece of the project is going along, that would be a good thing.
Those details again, please.
Yes, March 22nd, 6 PM, Dennis Council on Aging and Senior Center on Route 134 in South Dennis. Now, I don't know, there's always mixed feelings about whether or not we have to post an agenda for that, so I'll let the chair decide about that.
I would think, if we're going as individuals, I don't, and we're not holding a meeting, we don't participate. You're just gonna sit there and listen. I wouldn't think we would need to.
I don't think we need to if we don't contribute,
Yeah.
if we're there as observers, essentially. Then it becomes the fact-finding aspect of things. If afterwards we present the information and the facts we found to the group here, then whatever information flow is there, and that we can present, after all, after going to that meeting, just questions, I attended and I came away and I have additional questions, and then
Yeah.
that's something we can pursue as part of our mandate for information flow. But
That would
correct
be
me
my
if
guess.
anybody else
I
feels
would think that
differently
should
about
be,
it.
To tell you the truth, I would go either way, because these
Yes.
things are such a call that it's really up to the
because we're not really
chair to
presenting,
establish.
we're not really presenting anything, we're not really,
Well, if, for instance, if you go and you are going as a Harwich resident who is impacted by this, it's a separate
yeah.
category.
Yeah.
And it also would allow us to, if appropriate, invite some of the people who present at that meeting. If it's pertinent to our project, we could call them in to be part of our information gathering, and then it's from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, and that would be something maybe to do after May.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe something after May.
Yeah,
the
because
people-
it's a longer-term issue as well. It would be important, and it is, I mean, obviously, it impacts the whole town, not the Phase 2 and Phase 3
Right.
people. So.
It's not like it's dire that needs to be done before May.
And yet it
so,
has an impact, so,
Yeah.
you know, it's still something, and it would give them the chance to perhaps learn from what we've done if they come in and present to us, you know, I mean.
Yeah, all right. All right, so we didn't get to the discuss update to the frequently asked questions, but I think that's gonna come out with, when we do the, website itself.
So there are so many.
Yeah.
Which frequently asked questions are you referring to? I would look at it to see what I might give for input to update it if I knew which one.
Well, originally, my thought was to put all the frequently asked questions in one category. That was, I think, somebody's original thought. Presentations in one, frequently asked questions in another, and that's why I set this up the way I did. Now, if you want to, you know, when the three of us sit down and try to come up with a better layout and then bring it back to the committee.
I'm just saying that I'll be happy to look something over, but right now I don't know what to look over. So if you make it clear to me, maybe after your meeting, then I'll be happy to put some time into it.
And I was approaching it from the reverse side with the workbook of the answers to the frequently, I mean, my intent was to organize it around topics that, broad topics that engendered questions. It will never be 100% because it can't be, but at least it will tackle, there's a couple sections that, that will, I think, be left a little open. I mean, the funding issue, we can't resolve that right now. So I'm concentrating on the homeowner questions, if you will. And the people I've spoken to, the big issues, 3 big issues have been, oh, I thought the town was doing everything. That's where these generic letters are a problem. They think the town is going to turn up one day and do it from street into the house. They don't realize there's the other part. And when they do, there's a certain amount of economic panic. And which is somewhat calmed when you say, oh, it's just replacing a septic. It's what you would do if you had a sewer instead of a septic system. That's the translation that gets them over that. But how to work out hiring someone and the financing is challenging for many people. So I'm trying to put it together and what they have to think through. You know, a deck, a basement, finished basement, non-finished basement. There's all sorts of things they need to consider.
I don't know that that's going to be in our place to go through that. To me, that's going to be the people they hire.
No, I'm talking about if we're providing facts to people, it's what they need to think about.
Wow, that could be a document in itself.
Well, that's what I'm working on. You know, it's what somebody needs is a workbook. What do I do?
All
What
right.
do I ask myself? Where do I get the plan? What do I look at in the plan of my septic system? When do I start considering it? Don't go too soon, don't go too late.
All right, and that's what you were doing with the step-by-step?
No, it's a workbook. It's, in other words, the components that a homeowner needs to consider about what they should plan in reference to the sewer arriving at their home.
All right.
But you see that as sequential.
Topical. And sequential, yes.
Like, you get a HD TV, and you get a book with it, right? And you're gonna hook up your own television. You expect this, a sequential things you've gotta do before you can turn it on and see a picture.
There's some sequence to it and some that isn't. Some of these things won't be relevant. And some people only have a single question or 2 questions. You know, oh, my pipes go out of the front of the house. Automatically, a huge number of questions disappear. Oh, I have a finished basement. Oops, you may have more questions. You know, it's basically a what you need to think about. That's what I'm going for. And they're all related to the questions people ask, you know. So I've mapped it. I have a deck, what do I know? So there's a question on decks. I have, you know, it's all based on the
So
questions.
this really isn't the step-by-step document that we were talking about in here, like what Falmouth had. In other words,
Just from hearing Ann talk for the past two meetings, I see it as both.
It is
I-
both.
I see it as a step-by-step, and I haven't seen it,
Yeah.
but I'm just been listening to you. But I see it, I picture almost an Excel workbook, but it'd probably be, you know, a lot
A
nicer
block
than that.
diagram, like, remember the woman who presented here?
Right.
She had it
Right.
column
yeah,
A,
however.
column B.
But, so, you know, maybe, and I'm reading her mind, I guess, you know, the first first section would be, you know, these are the very first things you do.
You've
You
got
get your septic plan, and,
Yes.
you know, you find out your slope, and you might, whether she goes then into professional engineers or not, I'm not
That's the
sure.
sequence.
But once you open up that discussion, then you say, well, what about my deck? And you say, oh, thank goodness, here's some information here on decks. And
Yep.
this person doesn't have a deck or landscaping, so they don't need that supplemental detail that somebody else might need.
Yeah, it's a, what do you need to consider, where do you go? And there is some sequence. I mean, one of the interesting things Dan made a point is don't start too soon, but don't wait the minute you
Yeah.
need to. And I had heard other people say that, but I didn't know exactly why. And it's because until they have the pipes under the street, then you cannot do the plan until the exact location of the lateral connection has been determined.
That's what I meant
So
about the
you could
slope,
pay,
too.
you
right?
could pay to have too much done if you start too soon. You could pay and have to have somebody come back. On the other hand, if there's a shortage of people to do this, you want to be, and you have a timeline, you want to be early in the queue. Let's say, the reason you have a timeline is because you think you're going to sell the house in 5 years. Well, you don't want to be the last person putting in the sewer if you know, you're selling it to their kids, let's say, you know. You want to have everything nailed down.
all right, let's wait till we get it together before we. 'cause
No,
we're-
no, it's important to go forward,
Yeah.
you know.
But I'm saying, you know, for now, right this minute, you know, to get into all of that when we don't have the book
Well, I
ready.
think it's important to clarify it, to answer
Yes.
your question.
Yeah,
And that's
right.
where I was going. You needed exemplars.
Yeah, so, all right,
This is the standard kind of thing you hand out, for instance, if you're doing state-level projects. You know, the federal transportation asks the state has lists like this that they give to towns, and it's a standard procedure with installations. And I'm trying to mirror that.
all right. Okay. So,
Are we
finished?
finished?
I just want to make sure, so there's really nothing you need of us for March, I forgot the date, 15th, is it? Well,
Yep.
Yeah, that would be the next one, yeah.
That's the evening meeting.
right, so
Yeah,
our
that's
next
the eve-
evening meeting is March 15th at
Yeah.
6 o'clock.
Mhm.
And there's,
No, I'm gonna say most of it's gonna be Megan.
Okay.
And I will double check with her, but I have already called her, so she knows she's on.
If we have no public attendees, it might behoove us to have a set of questions that we know the the non-public would ask if they were there, you know.
Okay, all right, so is our motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn, Madam Chairman. Ask for a
Second it.
Okay, and now what do I do with this?
All in favor of the
All in
motion?
favor? Aye.
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 All right.